You're visiting the Mom Next Door and our stories of faith. I'm glad you dropped by for a visit. Please stay a while and hear what the Lord has done in the lives of moms just like you and me. Hi, friends. Most of us think that we are raising our kids, but what if they were actually the ones teaching us? Well, today on the Mom Next Door Stories of Faith, I'm talking with author Karen Whiting about the surprising lessons she learned from her own children. And I bet you and I will both be seeing ourselves through this conversation. Seems like there's always something that comes up that sparks a memory. I am so glad you're here. So it's just good to be somewhere we can have a mentor mom. And Karen has walked the path ahead of us. So she is now sitting in this seat of mentor for both you and I. Karen is a quiet and soft spoken, unassuming powerhouse. I cannot believe her experience and her adventures. When I listen to like the places she's been and some of the stuff that she's done, I'm like, really? Wow. I'm like, I'm a little like flabbergasted. Like, I cannot believe, Karen, that you've been all the places and done all the things and had so many experiences and natural disasters and yada, yada. I could go on. Um, but anyway, she is a military child, military wife. She's a widow, a mother to five, and grandma to many. Not sure if I've forgotten anything. So, Karen, maybe you just take it away. I'm going to say, tag, you're it. I would love to hear what you have to teach us today.
All right, thank you. And one of the things I want to start off with is when my youngest was 2.5 years old, Daniel, I kissed him goodbye. He was going off with his teenage oldest sister, and he twirled around, and I saw him wipe off that kiss and pat his chest. And I thought, oh, he's already gotten too big for my kisses. And he twirled back around, looked up at me, and said, "Do you know what I just did, Mom?" And I thought, I don't have the heart to say what I think you did. So I knelt down, looked him right in the eye, and said, "What did you do?" And I said, "I took your kiss and I put it in my heart. And today, if I feel sad or
Oh,
mad, I'll be okay." And yes, I
oh,
knew that's the reaction I had, just like you just did then.
yeah.
And as he left, I said, "Oh God, that is so sweet." And he says, "Well, that's why I tell you to put scripture in your heart, because that's a kiss you're putting in your heart." And I thought, oh, and that was one of those lessons from my child that I never forgot and always thought about how, if I don't want to take that scripture from God and put it in my heart, is it like brushing off a kiss from him,
Mm,
you know, but
yeah,
not putting it in the heart?
yeah, yeah.
So, yes. But then there are those moments that you think, I was such a bad mom. How could I have done that? And one day, the children had to bring costumes to school for a school show. And we get in the car, and I'm almost at school when James says, "I forgot my costume. I didn't put it in the car." So make a U-turn, go home, and said to everyone, "Now stay in the car." And I ran in, I grabbed the costume, I got back, threw it in the back end of the car with feathers coming up my face because he was being Big Bird. And I get in, I'm driving, and all of a sudden I'm getting a little calmer from all this. And I said, "James, why didn't you put that in the car?" And I keep asking questions, and he doesn't answer. He's quiet, but I finally said, "What is wrong with James? Can he not talk, or is he not here?" And Michael just says, "Oh, he's not here." I slam on the brakes and then look in the rearview mirror. And I thought, boy, that was not a good choice. Pull over to the side. And of course, do I believe them? No, I look under the seat to count all the feet. And he's not there. So I said, "All right, we're a block from school." So I drop them off. And Darlene looks at me with her sweet little eyes and says, "But how can I be a little bird without my big bird?"
Oh, that's sweet. But you're like, why didn't anybody mention something before we got here? Right? Like, why did you have
The
to keep
whole
that to
thing.
yourself?
I know it was, and Darlene usually would tell me anything. So then I go
Uh-huh.
home and I'm thinking, I wonder if he's panicking. How is he? How is he? And I get there and he's sitting on the front steps, and I have to go and lock the door and get him in the car. And he gets in, and I said, "Weren't you upset when you came out and I was gone?" And he says, "No, you came back for my costume, so I knew you would come back for me."
Wow.
And I just thought, oh, He trusted me so much. I can't believe that. And that night I'm praying and I said, God, I feel like such a failure. I left him behind. I didn't even count noses again before when I got back in the car. I said, what mother would do that? And I hear this little whisper saying, my mom did. Because Mary left Jesus behind, Mary and Joseph
Yeah.
did. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh, okay, I guess I'm not as bad as I thought I was. But there's those moments that you think, how could I have done it? And then you realize this is just the reality of life of what happens at times.
Yeah. Yeah. It gets complicated and things move. Okay. So, right off the bat, I want to ask you something totally not planned. How do you keep track of all these little stories? I mean, we just started, and I know you've got like hundreds of more stories. Do you just have a great memory, or do
I
you
do
like
have a very
keep
good memory.
outline?
I have a good
Okay.
memory, and I tell them so often to people because people will bring up something and it'll remind me. And then there'll at times be one that I haven't thought of in years that I will bring up. And, like you had just mentioned that I've been through all these disasters. I've been through more than a dozen natural disasters. So let me bring up one lesson I learned from my children from those. When Hurricane Andrew, which was huge, first Cat 4 to hit the US, okay? And my husband was away on military orders, being in the Coast Guard, and I have the kids all preparing everything. And I said, "Oh, put the canoe on Dad's car. He's not here." And so what difference will that make? And I kept doing things like that. But when that night, and we had been told we could not leave our house, we could not drive away. There would be too many people on the road, and our zip
Oh,
code, there were 3 zip codes that could not go. And the hurricane took a 90-degree angle turn, and we got a direct hit.
you alone
So,
with
and when
your
I looked
children.
out that night, yeah, I had 5 children in the house, with the youngest being 2, not quite potty trained, okay? And I saw the gumbo limbo trees bending in half. They're as big around as an oak tree. And I thought, we are getting hit. We are really getting hit. And I said to Rebecca, who was helping me at the last minute, I said, get everybody up, get them in my bedroom closet. As I wanted to go upstairs, we had this fluke of when the architect did everything, we didn't realize our closet was going to be 10 feet by 12 feet. So I had the space. God knew I would need that space. And we get in there, I had them bring a couple mattresses and we're laying down, and we would wake up if there was really huge noises. I mean, there was noise all night. And or if the baby wanted nursing. And above us, the original space to get the crawl space to go in the attic had a beam that went right through the middle of the crawl space. You never could have gone up it. And the board under it kept flapping and hitting it. But then I kept noticing, well, there's no water, there's no rain. We still have a roof. There's only some cool air coming in from the side vents. So that was a safety thing. But whenever they woke me up, I would read from the Bible. And about, I don't know, it was twilight, just beginning to have some light. And I read again, only this time I read Jesus calming the storm. And then after each time I read, I prayed. So I prayed for God to just stop the storm like he had for the disciples. And immediately everything stopped. And I waited a couple of minutes, and Michael pipes up from the back of the closet and says, Mom, you should have read that one first. He's always had the best sense of humor. And I said, You're right, Michael. You are so right. And I've never forgotten that any other time a disaster has come, and there have been many since, I have always said, God, calm the storm. But he stopped, and I thought, this could be the eye. It could come back through.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I didn't want to do things for a while. We waited, and then I finally left uh, Darlene to watch the baby, and took the 2 older kids. James must have stayed upstairs too. And I went down, and our sunken living room was sunk. It was just flooded. The
Oh,
front doors had blown, the back doors had blown, all kinds of things had gone on. I said, Michael, go to the garage, get a hammer, get a 2x4 kind of piece of wood, and hammer these front doors closed because the wind kept wanting to blow. By the time he got the stuff, my neighbor had come over and he helped, and everything just kept going on from there. But and the other thing that happened is God then said to me, I heard him say, pick up the phone, and I just laughed. And I said, God, pick up the phone. He says, pick up the phone. I said, all right, God, I should not laugh at you. I will pick up the phone. And I had a dial tone. I said, who do I call? And I made 5 calls, and I got one call in, and then the phone went dead. But I was able to contact my husband through a friend of who I knew could get hold of him from where he was at because he was staying in a hotel. I was able to get my side of the family, my husband's side of the family, my insurance company. That was really my second call.
Mm.
And people that worked for my husband, he was their boss in the Coast Guard, called me, and then they came over later to help me out because the fence had come down, and I was really petrified that these motorcyclists were just going across and they could have just gone right into the swimming pool.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and that would have been, a different disaster. At any
Yeah.
rate, we went through all of that, but it was those lessons of the children and how much they obeyed and how much they prepared and just did everything. And then Michael's comment, you should have read that one first, which, they remind us of we should have asked God, what do I read first instead of just randomly reading scriptures.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've gone through a lot of natural disasters, and so I mean, I guess there's a different level of preparation each time depending on what type it is and how much time you do have to get ready.
Yes, when we had a sideways tornado, a derecho, it came in the middle of the night. We had no warning. We didn't know that was coming. We were up in Maryland that doesn't even get tornadoes, let alone a
Uh-huh.
sideways one. But for us, it hit only part of our development, and it only hit the porch of our house, not the main part of the house, and took
Okay.
out the screening. And so that wasn't as bad as if our whole house had been hit like some of the neighbors.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
But it's still, you just have all these things. And when the hail hit the house roof here where I am, I really didn't expect that either. And I
Yeah.
didn't know how to react to that as much as some other things, but I
Yeah.
quickly found out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I am getting ready to have my grandkids for 2 weeks. Well, my daughter and son in law go out of the country for their anniversary. And one thing I was thinking is, you are going to relate to me all sorts of lessons that you've learned as you've watched your children grow, and as you continue on with the things that you have treasured up to tell me. I'm going to be taking notes because I think that I'm going to, when your children are home with you all the time and they're young, your senses are up for the cute things they say. And I'm kind of out of practice for that. And I am kind of anticipating the lessons that they will teach me while they're here. And also, that was also why I asked you, is there a way you record this? Because I'm sure that when their parents get back, I'm going to want to tell them the things. So anyway, that's my ulterior motive here is to hit you up from one grandma
Yeah.
to the other to train me. So keep
These
going.
days, these days, now that I'm a writer, I would be putting them in a spreadsheet just so I could find
Oh,
them all with the date of when it happened and what type of disaster or lesson or whatever it was.
yeah.
And I
Which
would
child? And
from
yeah,
that. Yes. Yes, because you never know what's going to come next. Michael was also my child that I would get calls all the time from school, from the principal, from the teacher. And I thought, he's trying so hard. And he really was, but he was a very big boy. And when I watched one time, he was so tall. I mean, my husband was 6'4". He was tall and he didn't go to school till he was 5.5. And one day I stood watching him in line outside waiting to go in, and somebody pushed against him and he just stood straight, did not budge. And that was like hitting a rubber wall. It knocked them all backwards from him. And he
the
didn't even know they
tower.
fell down because he did not turn. But he gets in trouble. And I thought, he did nothing. He just stood there. So finally, this one time when I get a call, but Michael's come home and he has told me that he got in trouble because this bully, and I knew who the bully was, he was on swim team with him, even though they were in kindergarten, they were on swim team because I had to use up Michael's energy and his physical strength.
Yeah. Hmm.
And he had walked over from the other side of the room to tease Michael until Michael finally took the straw out of his milk that he was holding and threw it on the floor. And that boy started screaming, and Michael got in trouble. The teacher called me, and I thought, I'm done. I'm going to do what you did, Jesus. You always ask questions. So I said, well, um, did you give that boy permission to be out of the room? And she says, it's about your son. I said, no, it's about two of them. It took, if he didn't get out of his seat, nothing ever would have happened. And she said, well, and I said, so anyways, did Michael physically touch him? She says, no. I said, did Michael get out of his seat? She said, no. And I said, did Michael say anything? She said, no, he's always quiet. And I said, so this boy comes and bullies him until he takes a very nonviolent step of taking a straw out of his drink. And that boy screamed. She says, well, yes. And I thought, okay, I'm done. I'm done here. And the next day I went in with stamps and index cards and stamp pads and said, would you, every time Michael does something good, even if he's just sitting through and made it through snack or whatever, stamp until you get this filled with so many stamps that you know he's had a good week. Because
Hmm.
she was a first year teacher and all she saw were the negative things. The
Oh,
next week, I go into the classroom, and she now has a clothesline across the room with clothespins and an index card for each child over their head. She has different
uh-huh.
clotheslines to track how well they're doing. And she started seeing the positive behavior and seeing Michael really was doing well. And that's when
Wow.
she finally realized that other boy really was the bully for a lot of
Wow.
the class because he
Wow.
wasn't getting stamps.
What a sweet way to like train the teacher. And as a new teacher, she kind of needed a little more experience and you lovingly, mentoringly, poured into her.
Right. Yes, but see, Michael had come home that day. Tell me what happened. He says, I didn't hurt him. I didn't get up. I didn't even say anything, Mom. I just took his straw because I didn't know what else I could do that wouldn't break a rule.
He was like weighing all the options and he chose well.
Yes. I said to the teacher, do you have a rule that he can't touch a straw? And she says, well, no. And I said, well, he told me that he was trying not to break a rule and you didn't have a rule against that. It's
Smart
just
kids,
funny.
Karen, smart
They
children.
are, but they're listening and they're trying to do things. And that made me also realize at times when they did something wrong, I said, well, didn't you know you couldn't do? Well, no, you didn't tell me I couldn't do that way. You know how they are on this? They catch you up on the legalism.
Yeah.
I'd have to say you have to start understanding the spirit of the law, of what's love,
Yes.
what's not, and
Yes.
work from it that way. But it's
Yes.
just an interesting thing with our children that we learn as we go along and we're thinking, I'm not
Yeah.
doing well. And I kept thinking, I'm not doing well because I can't help him behave at school. And it wasn't till I thought and he says, I'm trying, I'm trying. And it wasn't till I was able to have the teacher do something else until I started asking her
Mm,
questions instead of trying to defend my son,
mm,
that she
mhm,
started to listen and pay attention. And that's what we sometimes have to do. We have to be our
mm,
child's advocate too.
mm. Yeah. So you were, I guess, learning the lesson to be an advocate.
Yes. And I think he always felt I didn't stand up for him. I kept trying to say, well, you shouldn't have done this, you shouldn't have done that. And I thought, well, how much can he listen to that? And that's when he said, but I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And I didn't, all the things that he didn't do that would have been worse. And
Hmm.
that's when I realized, well, he's tried so hard to follow all the rules and he picked something
Hmm.
that he didn't think was a rule. And so that's where you're learning too, that you realize they are trying as hard as they can try.
And it's different for each one. We played upward basketball for a short time many years ago, and upward basketball, they do little devotionals after the games, and then I don't remember. It's been so long. I don't remember if it's quarterly or at the end of the year or what, but they do like a most Christ-like. I think it was at the end of the year, like a most Christ-like attitude trophy at the end of the year,
Yeah.
and each team got to give one for their team member. And I remember this child of mine um, was a little abrasive at times, I guess we say, is a little abrasive, and maybe had not developed the self control muscles and had um, not developed the patience yet, right? And so I know when they were doing that awards ceremony, like I didn't think this child was in the running for most Christ. Like I was not like, oh, maybe they will get it. Like I just didn't expect it. But I did not realize this child, as they were doing the whole ceremony, was thinking, maybe I'll get it. Maybe I'll get it. Maybe I'll get it. And then as we were driving home, this one says to me, I, I kind of thought I'd get that. I don't even know why I didn't get it because I didn't punch anybody all year. And I was like, okay, I am so proud of you. You're right. You did not. And you're a great kid. But they were looking for something a little beyond that.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't always know what's in their mind, which makes me think about a time when my parents were babysitting the kids. And I don't know where I was, but I came back and my mother and Michael, same one, are standing with fists clenched, looking at each other. My father's there. And I said, "What's going on?" And Michael said, "I did not break the window." And my mother said, "You had to. You're the only one who went down. You even said you went down those stairs to the basement." And my father said, "Well, the window is broken from the outside. The glass is all on the inside." And I said, "Michael, would you show me what you did?" And so they had been playing croquet, and the ball had rolled down the stairs. So he went to get the ball, and I said, "Did you have the croquet mallet with you?" He says, "Yes." So he goes down to pick up the ball. He turns around, and he puts the croquet mallet over his shoulder. And I thought, that's when you broke the window and you didn't know it because it was behind you. And my mother must have had the same thought. She said, "Oh, you didn't know." And
It
I
makes
said, "No,
sense
he
now.
didn't know he broke the window." But we had to replay the whole thing for
Uh-huh.
them to both realize he really didn't think he did it. And then he
Yeah.
says, "Oh, Grandma, I did break it, the window. What chores could I do to
Oh.
pay for the window to be
Hmm.
fixed?"
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
she felt so embarrassed that she'd gotten so mad at him that she didn't want him to do anything. However, he said, "But I'll pick up the glass." So he and Papa went and picked up the glass.
Oh, yeah.
But, it was one of those things that the perspective, but that helped me with the children. I said, "You only saw what you did. You didn't see what
Yeah.
was behind you." And I
Hmm.
said, "That happens in life. And I don't always see what you have seen. And we have to think
Hmm.
about our perspectives."
Yeah. Yeah, I had this conversation actually with an adult recently. We were talking about this, not recognizing, almost like, you talked about the teacher not recognizing the good in the kiddos. Um, in an adult situation, someone who was like only seeing the negative and only seeing themselves for all the positive things. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. You maybe only notice, you don't notice the positive things they're doing because you're not with them all the time. And just like I remember when my kiddos were little, and I would be disciplining one of them for, whatever it was. And you're there one on one having a conversation, and they know they're, getting a talking to. And I remember, and it happened to different ones of my children, like, well, that's not fair. Why am I getting talked to right now? Why am I in trouble when so and so did that and they're not in trouble? And I said, wait a minute. Why do you think they're not in trouble? Well, I never saw you discipline them for that. And I'm like, right. And where are they right now? Are they watching you get disciplined? No. Oh, well, guess what? They aren't watching you. They are not a spectator to your discipline, and you are not a spectator to theirs. Therefore, you can't assume just because you didn't see it, it didn't happen. And sometimes that can
Yes.
be seeing something, somebody did something, like you said, perspective. Like,
Right, yes. And at the same time, because they don't see the rest, they think they're being singled out and you don't
yeah,
love them as much as you love the other
yeah.
one. And that's where you have to step back when they say that comment and talk it through. It's like when my son looked at me and said, "Hey, how come you pay so much for Darlene to take dancing and you don't pay so much for me to do things?" And I said, "Well, if you want to take dance, I'll pay for that too." And he was like, "No, I don't want to take dance." I said, "Well, you have to understand one thing. You play soccer and the town and the taxes pay for that, but they don't
Ah,
pay for dance lessons. And so someone has to, and we feel God has taken care of your soccer expenses, but not of hers." And so we're doing, he says, "Oh, I get it." But he needed
yeah.
to talk it through because he's thinking, "I'm putting out all this money, and what's he getting?" Because he's not thinking about he doesn't even realize that's free.
Was that Michael again?
Yes.
I kind of I see a trend. Michael seems to have a high justice quotient, or
Well, he's a rocket scientist. So he was very brilliant when he was a little child. I
Uh-huh.
mean, at the same time,
Uh-huh.
he didn't talk till he was 2.5 years old, and that's because he fell off a sled behind his brother, and my husband kept going, and I'm trying to run to get to him, and he stands up, puts his hands on his hips, yells at the top of his lungs, first words really, "Hey, Dad, what's the big idea?" A full sentence. He didn't need to speak before that, other than a few words, book and mom, and a
Right.
few things. So it
He was
was just
processing though. He was watching it
this.
all.
Right. But I just stopped dead in my tracks, and so did my husband, thinking, did Michael say that? Did he really speak?
Well, they all have different personalities, and I guess there's a lot of things we can learn in from each one because of the personalities that God gave them.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, I learned even Daniel, besides the thing with school, when he was during that age of Veggie Tales, and he really liked this one song, "We Are the Sailors Who Don't Do
Don't
Anything."
do anything.
That
Hmm.
when he was supposed to be sorting the laundry, but he jumped up on top of the couch and started singing that really loud. And I looked at him and said, "Well, if you're a sailor who doesn't do anything, you don't get snack today and you don't get dinner." He goes, "Oh, I'm not a sailor who doesn't do anything." And he popped down and started working. He realized, okay, there's still consequences.
Yep. Like, okay, and I'm gonna interrupt and tell you something that when I asked you, how do you remember all these little things? I have to admit, I do not remember all these cute stories. And last night I sent a text to all of my children. We have, the family group text. And I said, my memory is failing about all the things that happened as you guys were growing up. Would you please do me a favor and send me a text or an email, written form is what I'm saying, because I won't remember it. Obviously, we've, gone through that once and I didn't remember it. So send me a text or an email, and you only have to put a word. Like in that one would be like, the pirates that don't do anything, a word or a phrase to
Right.
trigger my
Yes.
memory. And
Mhm.
then I will have it for my memory and enjoyment. But also, you know what? We're gonna have all of our kids here. Well, most. We're gonna have 8 out of 9 here next month. And I said, I am gonna take all of the stories you send me and all the one-word prompts or whatever happened, and I'm gonna cut out the little pieces of paper, and I'm gonna put them in a bowl. And in the evening, when we're all sitting around, we're going to pull one of those out, and I'm going to let you guys each take turns telling me what happened. And I kind of wonder, one, we'll get the perspective of what happened at the time. And I also am kind of a little curious if some things happened that I wasn't aware that happened now that they're in their
Right.
20s.
Yes.
And
Yes. You do sometimes they let loose and you find out something you didn't know had happened that they have covered up. And
yeah,
other times
yeah,
you do know what has happened. And
yep,
it's just,
yeah,
yeah. And there
yeah,
are always those who stand out because they have more sense of humor. They're more
yeah,
analytical, whatever that is.
yeah,
And you
yeah,
realize it. And others that they present a problem that you just have to figure out because they can't. Rebecca, when she was
yeah.
little, would just break down crying at a birthday party for her. She was okay at everybody else's, but not her own. She was
Oh,
so overwhelmed that probably her fourth, fifth birthday, I finally said, all right, we're not going to have her open all these gifts when people are there. We're going to do two different things. She can open one gift each hour before people come for the party to kind of
okay.
calm her down and let her have something
Yeah,
to do. And
yeah.
then when the party goes on, we're going to play um, a game where, like musical chairs, but a musical ball that you go around. And when
Uh-huh.
we stop, she opens just the gift from that child. She was overwhelmed by people wanting her to open their gift and other things, and she couldn't please everybody. And she was
Yeah,
overwhelmed too much at once. And so having us go on and just have to play and calm down and then open one she could handle. But it was
that's
watching,
smart.
deciding what is it that's overwhelming her so much.
Yeah.
She's looked forward to this party for weeks. She's invited her friends, and now no matter what, she's going to break down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's smart. You have so many great ideas and great stories to tell, and I am sad that our recording won't be as long as I
Water
would
are
like
in
it.
here.
There we go. I was going to ask you, is there a way to prolong this because or at least let's shift. So that is one of the books. You are an author of over 30
Yeah,
books.
34 books, three more coming out in the next 18 months. But the Growing a Mother's Heart and the Growing a Mother's Heart Bible Study, which go together, have a lot of the stories. The Growing a Mother's Heart Bible Study that goes with it really goes into things like how did Jesus respond? So that has the story of
Oh,
James being lost and which may also be in the Mother's Heart one because they go, tie together. But it has little things about what are we learning from God? And when we
yeah.
don't enough, what does he have to remind us that these other people in the Bible weren't perfect, so he doesn't
Mm-hmm.
expect us to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect. He just
Mm-hmm.
wants us to be loving.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard when everybody's at home and they're young. We kind of get distracted or get overwhelmed easy. And then there's that verse, and I can't remember the reference, but the verse that says he gently leads those that are with young. Like God is good to walk with us through all of our mothering years. And I don't know. For me, stories speak to my heart, and I learn more about God through stories, through testimonies. That's why I
Yes.
do this, right? And I think that God walks with us so gently and ministers to us through the lives of other women, through studying his word, and like you said, teaching us through our children.
Right. Oh, and we learn so much that way. And that's, yeah, in fact, that's why when I wrote a mom Bible study, it was uh, story based, Bible story and our stories, our funny personal
Yeah.
ups, down stories, whatever has happened, in order to
Mhm.
bridge that. And then all these little sidebars and bullet points of what can you do? How can you
Yeah.
get them to bed when they don't want to sleep? And
Yeah.
why did they interrupt you? Which of course goes along with the story of the disciples waking Jesus up during the night when he's sleeping on a boat and there's a big storm.
There's a
And
correlation there.
the final correlation to our child and to us and what Jesus said to the disciples is, don't you trust me? Don't you have any faith? I'm
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
And so it was, that's what I try to do in that Bible study. So mom can feel, okay, I get it. I understand now that you understand me, God.
Yeah.
And Jesus,
Yeah.
you know what I'm going through. You've been through a
Yeah.
lot of these things,
Yeah.
and I can get through it too.
So, a lot of practical tips and encouragement and story and Bible study.
Yes.
And my guess is that instead of you wouldn't even have to work through the whole thing start to finish, you could just pick it up and grab a chapter that looks intriguing and work through that.
Oh, yes, on that, because every unit for the Bible study is a different one. One is on finance and one is on those sleepless nights and the
Okay. Yeah.
difficult days. And so each one is so separate that you can do whichever unit you
Uh-huh.
need most.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So great. Okay, so that is just one of the lots of books. You write for moms, you write for children, and you're a very crafty person. So you have some like hands-on craft guides and you teach
Yes.
biblical lessons throughout all these things.
Yes, I do, all of them. The craft book, the paper craft book is really based on kindness because they always have a way to write or use to speak to share kindness with someone else. So you're not just making 101 paper crafts, you're doing something with it to notice other people and help them out in different
Yeah.
ways. So that's the underscoring part of that. And I did that with my older daughter.
Yeah. The character training portion of it. Yeah.
hmm So, well,
Yeah.
she's a very crafty person too. And then
Yeah.
because I had a puppet ministry and a puppet TV show, I do have a couple of puppet books and yeah, lots of different things.
Well, this is part of my tactic going into my 2 weeks with my grandkids. I actually have already gone to Hobby Lobby and stocked up on a bunch of little kits. And I said, we're going to do one craft every day, even if it's only coloring, because I know that that's a way to keep them busy. It's a way to keep me busy. We're all going to be happy. And I bought these like cardboard boxes for each child so that when they arrive at my house, I'm going to give them a treasure box. And I'm going to be like, everything that if you make something while you're here this week at Gaga's house, or if you color something, or whatever, we're going to put it in this box. So then we make sure it makes it home to mom and dad's house when the week is done. And then that becomes their show and tell box to explain to mom and dad and tell them all about the week, which would maybe get mom and dad over the jet lag while they sit there and listen to the stories. So
Yes.
crafts is, always looking for new craft ideas and things to do with
Right.
the children.
Well, and my children started out when they were very little. I gave them each their own little box of crafts, which later became a big cabinet of craft supplies for everybody. And I can remember when Jim was out to sea before Christmas and they got waylaid by a search and rescue call they didn't expect. They weren't even a ship that does search and
Mm-hmm.
rescue, but the Coast Guard does,
Yeah.
so they did. And
Yeah.
every day we worked on just a children's tree and made an ornament for it. So she brings in one child, and then it's a parade of children who their dads are on the same ship and they're not there. Can they make the ornaments for their tree
Oh,
before dad gets home? And we started doing this. And I always had a little scripture lesson with each ornament we made, whether it was a toilet paper roll soldier or whatever I had made up.
yeah.
And so that always became a thing right up through high school. Kids would just show up saying, I have a project and you're the only one who has supplies that can help me. And they just go right back to the blue cabinet and get what they need.
You know what? And they don't seem to outgrow that, right? You want to be the popular house in the neighborhood and have all the kids come over to your house to play. Have the craft supplies and be willing to get messy.
Yeah, right. And share. And they
Yeah.
knew the cabinet that had the school supplies, the cabinet had the craft supplies and that type of thing. But that's part of the fun of being a mom. They also knew I had mints by the front door. You took a mint. Well, I especially did this with my youngest because he had friends that had foul mouths, even though that he was so
Okay.
young because of their homes. And I would say you can have a mint to remind you that what you put in your mouth is sweet and what comes out had better be sweet, or you are going to be sent home. And I remember this one little boy is going up the stairs with Daniel, and he said, Oh, your mother won't really do that. And he says, My mother, if she says anything, she follows through. She will do it, and you will go home if she hears anything. And he goes, Oh, I'm not going to say anything wrong. I remember one time his house wasn't always a safe place. He came and he knocked on the door and said, Can I come in? I said, Well, Daniel's not here. He says, I'll come in. I'll sit. I won't say anything bad. All right, you can come in. I mean, I talked to his aunt at times to say, Hey, what's going on? And they were
Yeah.
working things out
Yeah.
with that family. But
Yeah.
yeah, they learned quickly and the neighbors
Yeah.
learned too.
Yeah. 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 Well, okay. We're going to take this to a digital neighborhood because we've run out of time. And so I want people to find you. You are on Instagram, you have a website. If you want to mention any of those, you can. Otherwise, I'm just going to
Yeah,
direct people to the show notes and they'll be there as well.
right. The two I'm really on are Facebook and Pinterest. I'm
Okay.
visual, being an art person, so I like doing things on Pinterest. And
Yeah.
yes, I occasionally, well, I have one group I do that when I put a post up on there, it goes into Instagram, but that's not one that I'm on very often, and I'm not
Yeah.
on Twitter very often. But,
Okay.
we all have our favorites.
Yeah, that sure thing. So I will put those in the show notes for sure, links to those, and then probably to a few of the books that you've written. And I so appreciate this time being here. Do you have anything else you want to share with us before I ask you to close us out in prayer?
Yeah, no, only if they want crafts and all, they can actually go to my YouTube channel, watch the baking and the crafts and it gives you a link to the downloads to get the pattern or whatever. So if you need something
Oh,
like that,
yeah,
go to my
great.
YouTube channel. I haven't put anything new up lately, but the things there are still very good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? If they did not do it a long time ago, you've got like an always the next batch of kiddos that is ready to do
Yes.
something. So that is fantastic.
So
So,
anyway, yes,
yeah.
I would be thrilled to pray. Dear
All
Lord,
right.
I thank So much for Pam Fields and all that she does, that she has such a heart for these moms and a heart for children. And that's what you want us to have as mothers, that we want to look at all the children and not have any of them feel left out, whether they live under our roof or not. And so just bless us and guide us and give us the wisdom that we need to notice what the children need and to have that listening heart and listening ears of Proverbs 2:2, that we will listen and try to understand what the children are saying to us and learn from that, because you give them so much wisdom too. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
Amen. Well, thanks for being here. And friends, take a minute to hit the follow button, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening to right now. We would love to see you next time as we bring testimonies and encouragement to you. Thanks so much. Bye bye. I hope that you've been encouraged or challenged in your faith today, and that something we discussed prompts you to grow deeper in your walk with the Lord. If it has, make sure you tell a friend so they can grow along with you. And if you or a friend would like to be a guest and share about God's faithfulness in your life, please email me at podcast@tendingfields.net. Because when we tell of God's faithfulness, we never run out of stories.
Whatever is true.